I am Derek, 34 years old, and until last month, I thought I understood what boundaries meant in my family. After 7 years of overtime and sacrificing weekends, I finally bought my dream house. Clean lines, open spaces, and completely mine. When I left for that business trip to San Francisco, everything was perfect. I never imagined coming home to find my sanctuary invaded by my brother. Moved in with his entire family, and everyone telling me I should be grateful. Before I dive into this nightmare, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe to join me on this journey of reclaiming what is mine. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Ohio, I always knew I wanted more than what my parents had. Not that they did not provide well enough. Dad worked as a production supervisor at a local factory, and Mom was an elementary school teacher. We had everything we needed, but I dreamed of designing beautiful spaces that inspired people. That dream pushed me through community college first, then a scholarship to finish my architecture degree. My path was not easy. I worked construction jobs every summer and on weekends, learning the practical side of building while studying the theoretical aspects in school. Many nights I survived on ramen noodles and coffee sketching designs until my hands cramped. When I graduated, I took an entry-level position at a small firm, sleeping on a friend's couch to save money. Every penny went toward building my portfolio and reputation. Meanwhile, my younger brother Marcus took a different approach to life. 2 years, my junior Marcus always had a charm about him that made things come easily. Where I worked methodically, Marcus relied on his personality. He married Laura right out of high school, and they had twins before they turned 22. Marcus bounced between jobs, never quite finding his passion or sticking with anything long enough to build a career. Our parents always had a soft spot for Marcus. When he needed money for rent, they dipped into their savings. When he lost another job, they watched the twins so he could go to interviews. I never begrudged him their help, but I noticed a pattern. My achievements were expected, his failures excused. After 10 years of disciplined saving and climbing the corporate ladder, I finally had enough for a down payment on my dream home. It was not extravagant by some standards, but to me, it represented everything I had worked for. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, an open concept living area, perfect for entertaining, and most importantly, a dedicated office space where I could work on freelance projects. The backyard was modest but private, with enough space for a small garden that I tended with the same care I put into my architectural drawings. I kept my house immaculate. Every surface gleamed, every item had its place. My friends joked that it looked like a model home, but to me, the order represented control over my life that I had earned through years of hard work. The pristine environment helped me think clearly, design better, and maintain the professional image I needed for my career advancement. The business trip to San Francisco came as a surprise opportunity. My firm was competing for a contract to design a sustainable office complex, and my boss selected me to present our proposal. Success would mean not just a substantial bonus, but also consideration for partnership. I spent weeks preparing refining designs, rehearsing my presentation, until I could deliver it in my sleep. This was the chance I had been working toward for years. 3 days before my departure, I received a call from my mother while I was finalizing my presentation materials. "Derek, honey, your father and I were thinking," she began in that tone that immediately made me wary. "You will be gone for 2 weeks, and your house will be sitting empty. What if something happens? A pipe bursts, or someone tries to break in?" "I have a security system, Mom," I replied, distracted by the slide I was editing. "And my neighbor Jeff checks the property daily." "But what if there is an emergency that requires someone to get inside quickly? We were thinking you should give us a spare key just to be safe." I paused my work, giving the conversation my full attention now. Something in her voice triggered a warning bell, but I dismissed it as paranoia. "I do not know, Mom. I value my privacy." Derek James Miller. She used my full name, something she only did when she was disappointed in me. "We are your parents. Do you think we would invade your privacy? This is purely for emergencies." After 10 more minutes of gentle but persistent guilt-tripping, I relented. The day before my flight, I dropped off a spare key, with them making my expectations clear. This is only for absolute emergencies, I emphasized. Not for dropping by to water plants or check mail. I have arrangements for that already. Of course, dear Mom patted my hand. We would never enter your home without a good reason. We respect your space. Dad nodded in agreement. Just peace of mind for all of us, son. As I boarded my flight to San Francisco, I felt nothing but optimism. My presentation was ready, my house was secure, and this trip could change the trajectory of my career. 2 weeks would fly by, and I would return to my peaceful sanctuary refreshed and hopefully with a major professional victory under my belt. I had no idea that by handing over that key, I had effectively surrendered the sanctuary I had worked so hard to create. My flight from San Francisco landed at 8:30 in the evening. The presentation had gone exceptionally well, with the clients showing genuine enthusiasm for our designs. My boss had already called to congratulate me, hinting strongly that the partnership discussion would begin once the contract was finalized. Exhausted but satisfied, I grabbed my luggage and headed to the long-term parking garage, eager to sleep in my own bed after 2 weeks away. The first sign that something was wrong appeared as I turned onto my street. 2 unfamiliar vehicles sat in my driveway, a rusted blue sedan I had never seen before, and my parents' familiar silver SUV. My stomach tightened. Had there been an emergency after all? Why were they still here at this hour? I parked along the curb since my usual spot was occupied. As I approached my front door, I noticed the living room lights blazing through the windows. Through the glass, I could see movement, several people moving around inside. Confusion gave way to concern as I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The scent hit me first, a mixture of unfamiliar cooking smells, baby powder, and something else I could not immediately identify. Then came the visual assault. Shoes of various sizes scattered across my normally pristine entryway. Toys littered the living room floor. A makeshift clothesline had been strung between my dining area and kitchen with what appeared to be freshly washed children's clothing hanging from it. I stood frozen, my suitcase still in hand, trying to process what I was seeing. Then I heard a child's laugh, followed by the pounding of small feet. A little boy, maybe 4 years old, raced around the corner, followed closely by his identical twin brother. My nephews, whom I had only seen a handful of times at family gatherings. "Uncle Derek," one of them shouted, skidding to a stop. "Daddy said you have Nintendo." Before I could respond, more footsteps approached, and my brother Marcus appeared in the hallway. He wore sweatpants and a faded t-shirt, looking completely at home. "Hey bro, welcome back," he greeted me with a casual wave, as if this situation were completely normal. "Mom said you would be home tonight. How was the trip?" My mouth opened and closed several times before I could form words. "Marcus, what are you? Why are you in my house?" "Oh," his expression shifted slightly, a flicker of discomfort quickly replaced by casual nonchalance. "Right, I guess Mom and Dad did not get a chance to call you yet. We had a situation with our apartment. Landlord sold the building. New owner wanted everyone out. We needed a place to stay urgently. And you chose my house, without asking me. Well, you were in California doing your big shot presentation thing. Mom and Dad said you would not mind helping family out in a crisis." As if summoned by their mention, my parents appeared from the kitchen. Mom carried a dish towel and Dad held a mug of what smelled like my premium coffee. "Derek." "There you are." Mom rushed forward as if this were her home, and I was the visitor. "We tried calling your cell yesterday, but it went straight to voicemail." "I was on a plane," I said flatly. "But that does not explain this." I gestured broadly at the chaos that had once been my immaculate living space. Dad stepped forward. "Son, your brother and his family were in a tight spot. The eviction notice gave them just 72 hours. What were they supposed to do? Stay in a motel with 2 young children? They could have." I began, but Mom cut me off. "Family helps family, Derek. We raised you better than to turn your back on your brother when he needs you." My sister-in-law Laura emerged from what I recognized with growing horror as my home office. She carried a laundry basket filled with folded clothes. "Oh, Derek, you are back early. We thought you would be home tomorrow." "Early? This is my house," I said, my voice rising despite my attempt to stay calm. And what are you doing in my office? Laura had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. We needed somewhere to put our things, and since you were not using it, I pushed past her to look into my office and felt my heart sink. My carefully organized workspace had been transformed into a makeshift bedroom. A blow-up mattress occupied the center of the room, surrounded by open suitcases and boxes. My desk had been pushed into a corner, and my desktop computer was unplugged, its components stacked haphazardly to make room for what appeared to be a changing station for the babies. "Where are my project files?" I asked, panic rising. I had blueprints and client proposals organized on that desk. "I put all your work stuff in those plastic bins." Marcus pointed to a stack of storage containers shoved under the window. "No big deal, right? You were not using them while you were gone anyway." I turned slowly, taking in the full extent of the invasion. Every space in my home showed evidence of their presence. Dishes piled in the sink, unfamiliar food items crowding my refrigerator, someone's medication bottles lined up on my kitchen counter. "How long have you been here?" I managed to ask. "About 10 days, Marcus replied. "Kids love it here. So much more space than our old apartment." 10 days, I echoed. "And how long are you planning to stay?" An uncomfortable silence fell. Marcus looked at our parents, who suddenly found great interest in examining the floor tiles. "Well," Marcus finally said, "we have enrolled the boys in the elementary school down the street. The new semester starts next week." The implication hit me like a physical blow. You enrolled them in school in my neighborhood, so this is not a temporary arrangement in your mind. "Derek," my mother's voice took on the soothing tone she had used throughout my childhood when trying to get me to accept something unpleasant. "Your brother needs stability right now. This is a wonderful neighborhood with excellent schools. You have all this space for just one person. Would it really be so terrible to have family around? You might even enjoy the company once you adjust." I looked from face to face, searching for any sign that they recognized the enormity of what they had done. Instead, I saw only expectation and entitlement, as if I were the unreasonable one for questioning this arrangement. "You should be grateful, honestly," Laura added, adjusting the laundry basket on her hip. "This place was kind of sterile before. We have made it feel like a real home." A real home. I looked at my living room, where one of the twins was using my imported leather couch as a trampoline, while the other had opened a juice box that was precariously close to my hand-knotted wool rug. The family photos I had carefully arranged on my mantel had been replaced by crayon drawings stuck to the wall with what appeared to be chewing gum. In that moment, standing in the doorway with my suitcase still in hand, I realized I was experiencing something beyond anger or shock. I was mourning the loss of the sanctuary I had created for myself, a space that represented everything I had worked for. And the people who should have respected that achievement most had violated it without a second thought. After the initial shock wore off, I attempted to have a rational conversation. I suggested we all sit down at the dining table, but discovered it was covered with arts and crafts supplies and half-completed school registration forms. We moved to the living room instead, where I had to clear toys off the couch just to have a place to sit. "I understand you were in a difficult situation." I began choosing my words carefully, but moving into my home without permission crosses a serious boundary. Marcus leaned back, one arm stretched across the back of my sofa with casual ownership. "Come on, bro. Boundaries. We are family. When one of us is in trouble, the others step up. That is how it works." "Stepping up does not mean taking over someone else's home without their knowledge or consent," I countered. "You could have called me in California. We could have discussed options." "And what would you have said?" My father jumped in. "That we should wait 2 weeks while they lived in their car. Sometimes action needs to be taken quickly." "There were other options," I insisted. "You could have helped them find a short-term rental, or they could have stayed with you." My mother looked offended. "Our house only has 2 bedrooms, and your father's back cannot handle sleeping on the couch. Your place has 3 bedrooms and you only use 1. It just makes logical sense." "Logic would include asking the homeowner first," I pointed out. Laura, who had been silently watching the exchange, spoke up. "Derek, I know this is not ideal, but try to see it from our perspective. We lost our home with almost no warning. The twins were scared and confused. We needed stability fast. I sympathize with your situation, but— Do you? Marcus interrupted. Because it sounds like you are more concerned about your precious house than your own family's welfare. Some of us do not have the luxury of perfect planning and savings accounts. Some of us have real-world problems. His implication that my success somehow made me less connected to real-world problems stung. Everything I had earned through years of hard work and careful planning. My concern, I said, maintaining my composure is not just about the house. It is about respect. You did not respect me enough to ask permission before moving in. You did not respect my personal space or belongings. We have been very careful with your things, my mother protested. My office has been completely dismantled, my computer unplugged and moved without any care for the connected devices, my files shoved into storage bins. That does not feel careful to me. One of the twins chose that moment to run through the living room, a marker in hand, drawing a wobbly line along the wall as he went. No one but me seemed to notice. Kids will be kids. Marcus shrugged when I pointed it out. Walls can be repainted. Family is forever. How long are you planning to stay here? I asked directly. Again, the uncomfortable silence descended. Marcus and Laura exchanged glances. Well, Laura began hesitantly. As Marcus mentioned, we have enrolled the boys in school here. The truth is, we have been looking for a place in this neighborhood for years, but it is simply out of our price range. So you thought you would just move into my house indefinitely? The realization made me feel physically ill. Not indefinitely, Marcus clarified, though his tone lacked conviction. Just until we get back on our feet. I have some promising job prospects that could pan out in the next few months. Months, I echoed. You expect to live here for months? Derek James. My mother used my middle name again. Your brother has children to consider. Stability is crucial for their development. Moving them repeatedly would be traumatic. And what about my stability? My life? My work? I need my office for projects. I have clients who visit occasionally. This is not just my home. It is connected to my livelihood. You have that fancy office downtown. Marcus waved dismissively. You can work there. That is not the point, I insisted, frustration mounting. The point is that this is my home purchased with my money, and I get to decide who lives here. So selfish, my father muttered, shaking his head. Always were, even as a boy. Never wanted to share your toys, and now you will not share your home with your own flesh and blood. The characterization was unfair and untrue, but it revealed the family dynamic at play. My boundaries were seen as selfishness, while their entitlement was framed as family loyalty. I think you are overreacting, Laura said. This place has way too much space for one person anyway. It is actually nice now with some life in it. Before it looked like one of those staged homes no one actually lives in. I bit back a sharp reply about the definition of nice, looking at the juice stains on my couch and marker on my walls. We are family, Marcus repeated as if those 3 words trumped all other considerations. Family helps family. When I get back on my feet, I will make it up to you. And when exactly will that be? I pressed. What is your plan here? Are you actively job hunting, saving for a new place? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. The job market is tough right now, but I have sent out some resumes, and Laura might pick up some part-time work once the boys start school. Might I caught the conditional term immediately? Well, childcare is expensive, Laura explained. It might not make financial sense for me to work just to pay someone else to watch our children. The picture became clearer. They had no concrete plan to leave. In their minds, they had found the perfect solution to their housing problem, my house with me, as the unwitting provider. What about rent? I asked. Are you planning to contribute to the mortgage or utilities while you are here? The question was met with uncomfortable silence. You would charge your own brother rent? My mother finally asked, her voice thick with disapproval. When he has children to feed. Most adults pay for their housing, Mom, I pointed out. Why should Marcus be exempt from that basic responsibility? Because he is going through a difficult time, my father jumped in. Because that is what family does, they help without keeping score. I'm not keeping score, I countered. I am asking about basic adult responsibilities. We could help around the house instead, Laura offered. I could cook and clean. Marcus is great with yard work. I looked pointedly at the current state of my kitchen with its piled dishes and cluttered counters. And how has that been going so far? We have been getting settled, she said defensively. Once we have a routine established, things will run more smoothly. The conversation continued in circles for over an hour. Every time I raised a legitimate concern, it was dismissed as selfishness or a lack of family loyalty. When I pointed out practical issues like space privacy or financial responsibility, the response was emotional manipulation about family obligations and the needs of the children. By the end of the discussion, nothing had been resolved. My family clearly expected me to accept their presence indefinitely without conditions or time limits. They genuinely believed I should be grateful for the company, as if my preference for a clean, ordered living space was some kind of character flaw that they were helping me overcome. As I finally retreated to my bedroom, the only space not yet colonized by my brother's family, I felt a profound sense of violation. Not just of my home, but of my autonomy. The message was clear: my needs, preferences, and boundaries were secondary to my brother's, as they always had been. Lying in bed that night, listening to unfamiliar noises in a house that no longer felt like mine, I realized this was about much more than an unauthorized stay. It was about a lifetime of unequal expectations and one-sided sacrifices. And for the first time, I began to consider whether maintaining these family relationships was worth the cost to my well-being. The days that followed my return were a study in mounting tension. I tried to establish some basic ground rules, keeping common areas clean, respecting my personal space, and setting a timeline for their departure. Each attempt was met with resistance, passive aggression, or outright dismissal. My morning routine, once a peaceful preparation for the workday, became an obstacle course of chaos. The bathroom I had meticulously designed with dual sinks and a rainfall shower was perpetually humid, the counters sticky with spilled toothpaste and hair products I did not recognize. Towels that I had previously folded with precision lay in damp heaps on the floor. The boys are still learning bathroom etiquette, Laura explained when I mentioned it. They will get better with time. Time, a word that had taken on new meaning. How much time would they need? How much of my life would be consumed by this unwanted arrangement? Privacy became a foreign concept. I would emerge from my bedroom to find one of the twins going through my mail, or Marcus lounging in my chair watching sports on my television, feet propped on my coffee table. "Make yourself at home," I muttered sarcastically one evening. "Thanks, bro." "Already have," Marcus replied without irony, reaching for the premium craft beer I had been saving for a special occasion. The financial burden grew quickly. My refrigerator, typically stocked with carefully selected ingredients for the few meals I cooked each week, was constantly emptied and refilled with processed foods and sugary snacks. My utility bills doubled. When the Wi-Fi slowed to a crawl, I discovered Marcus had been streaming movies on multiple devices simultaneously while I tried to upload project files for work. "We need entertainment," he shrugged when confronted. "The boys get bored easily." Work became my only refuge. I began leaving early and returning late, spending extra hours at the office just to avoid the chaos at home. My productivity suffered nonetheless. Nights of interrupted sleep left me foggy and irritable. Important client calls were punctuated by the background noise of children screaming or television blaring. Twice I had to reschedule video conferences because the internet connection became unusable when everyone was streaming simultaneously. My boss noticed the change. "Everything okay, Derek? You seem distracted lately." I gave vague explanations about family issues, unwilling to admit the full extent of my situation. It seemed professionally embarrassing to confess that at 34 years old I could not manage my own household. A week after my return, I attempted to speak with my parents, privately hoping they might see reason without Marcus present. I invited them to lunch at a quiet restaurant where I carefully laid out my concerns. "I understand wanting to help, Marcus," I began, "but this situation is unsustainable. My work is suffering. My home is no longer my own. There needs to be an exit strategy." My mother reached across the table to pat my hand. "Darling, I think you are being a bit dramatic. This is an adjustment period, that is all. You have lived alone too long. It is not healthy. My mental health was perfectly fine before coming home to find my house taken over, I pointed out. Your brother needed help, my father said firmly. What were we supposed to do? Let them live on the street. You could have consulted me first, I replied for what felt like the 100th time. We could have found a solution together that respected everyone's needs. There was no time, my mother insisted. And frankly, Derek, we were concerned you might say no. The admission stunned me into silence. They had deliberately avoided asking because they knew I might refuse. They had not respected my right to make decisions about my own property. So, you decided to present me with a fait accompli. Instead, I finally said, create a situation where saying no would make me the villain. No one is calling you a villain, my father said, though his tone suggested otherwise. We are simply asking you to be generous with what you have been blessed with. Your brother has children. They need stability. And what about what I need? My mother sighed. Derek, sometimes being an adult means putting others before yourself. Marcus would do the same for you if the situations were reversed. I doubted that very much, but arguing the point seemed futile. My parents had already cast me as the selfish one in this scenario, and nothing I said seemed capable of changing that perception. The situation at home continued to deteriorate. I discovered Marcus using my personal laptop without permission, claiming he needed to send job applications. When I checked the browser history later, it showed hours of social media and online gaming, not job searches. Laura began reorganizing my kitchen to make it more functional for a family disregarding my systems that had worked perfectly for me. Items disappeared from their proper places, reappearing days later in illogical locations or not at all. The twins, energetic and unsupervised, treated my home like a playground. Fingerprints smudged my glass coffee table. Juice spilled on my area rugs. One afternoon I found them jumping on my bed, using my pillows as weapons in a mock battle that had left feathers scattered across my bedroom. Boys will be boys, Marcus said with a grin when I confronted him about it. They need to burn off energy. They need boundaries, I countered. And supervision. Are you telling me how to parent now? His smile faded. Because last I checked, you do not have kids, so maybe stay in your lane. The comment stung particularly because I had always imagined having children someday when my career and home were established. Now that future seemed in jeopardy, along with everything else I had worked for. 2 weeks after my return, I discovered through social media that Marcus had been telling friends and extended family that I had generously offered my home to them during their time of need. Photos of my living room appeared on Laura's profile with captions about family coming together and grateful for brother Derek's big heart. The narrative they had constructed bore no resemblance to reality. In their version, I was the magnanimous brother who had opened his home willingly. The truth that they had invaded my space without permission and refused to leave was conveniently omitted. Calls and messages began arriving from relatives. I rarely spoke with praising my generosity and family-first attitude. One aunt even suggested I should be considered for Brother of the Year for my selflessness. The final straw came when I returned from work one evening to find Marcus wearing my watch, a limited edition timepiece I had purchased to celebrate my first major design award. He sat at my dining table, the watch prominently displayed on his wrist as he scrolled through his phone. "Why are you wearing my watch?" I asked, the calm I had been struggling to maintain finally shattering. He glanced up, surprised by my tone. "Relax, I was just trying it on. Wanted to see how it felt. Might get one when my ship comes in." "Take it off," I said, my voice low and tight. "Now." "Geez, no need to be like that. It is just a watch." But he removed it, sliding it across the table with less care than I would have liked. "It is not just a watch. It is my property which you used without asking, like everything else in this house." Marcus rolled his eyes. "Here we go again with the property speech. You know your problem, Derek. You care more about things than people. They are just possessions." "No, my problem is that I have a family who does not respect me, my space or my boundaries," I replied, my voice rising. "Who takes what they want without asking, and then makes me the bad guy for objecting." The argument escalated quickly. Laura emerged from the kitchen, the twins peeking around her legs with wide eyes. My parents, who had been watching television in the living room, hurried in to see what the commotion was about. "What is going on here?" my father demanded. "Derek is having a meltdown over his precious watch," Marcus said dismissively. "It is not about the watch," I shouted, finally losing the composure I had clung to for weeks. "It is about respect. It is about coming home to find my life turned upside down without my consent. It is about being expected to sacrifice everything while Marcus sacrifices nothing." "How dare you?" my mother gasped. "Your brother lost his home. And now I have lost mine," I shot back. "Except I am still paying the mortgage on it." The room fell silent for a moment, the tension thick enough to cut. "If that is how you feel about helping family," Marcus finally said, his voice cold, "then maybe you are not the person I thought you were." "Maybe I am not," I agreed. "Maybe I am finally becoming someone who stands up for himself, instead of always putting everyone else first." "Children present," Laura hissed, covering the twins' ears belatedly. I looked around at their faces, shock, disappointment, anger. Not one of them seemed to understand or acknowledge the legitimacy of my position. In their eyes, I was the villain of this story, the selfish brother who valued material possessions over family bonds. In that moment, I realized something had broken between us, perhaps irreparably. And strangely, alongside the sadness that realization brought, I felt something else: relief. The pretense was over. The truth was out in the open. I was done being the accommodating one, the reliable one, the one who always gave in. "This situation cannot continue," I said, my voice calmer now. "I need my home back. I need my life back." "So you would put your own brother and his children out on the street?" my father challenged. "No," I replied firmly. "I am giving you all fair warning. This arrangement is ending, and we need to figure out next steps that work for everyone, not just for Marcus." As my family exchanged glances, I saw something shift in their expressions. For the first time since this began, they seemed to realize I was serious. This was not a negotiation. Things were going to change whether they liked it or not. The confrontation over my watch marked a turning point. The thin veneer of family harmony dissolved, completely revealing the toxic dynamic underneath. My parents stopped speaking to me, directly communicating through Marcus or Laura instead. Marcus alternated between cold silence and pointed jabs about my materialism and lack of family values. The atmosphere in my home became unbearable. I could feel the tension the moment I walked through the door each evening, thick as fog and twice as suffocating. Even the twins sensed it, their normally boisterous behavior subdued when I was present. 3 days after our blow-up, I met with a friend who practiced family law. Over lunch, in a quiet corner of a restaurant far from my office, I laid out the situation. "So let me get this straight," Simon said after listening to my story. "They moved in without permission, while you were away, have been there for almost a month now, and refused to leave." "That is the situation," I confirmed. "What are my options legally?" Simon leaned back, his expression troubled. "Derek, I have to be honest with you. This is not just a legal issue, it is a messy family situation. But from a purely legal standpoint, you need to be careful here." "Careful how?" "In many states, once someone has established residency, even without a formal lease or your permission, they have certain rights. If they have been receiving mail there, enrolled kids in school using that address, or can show they have been living there for a certain period, they could claim tenant rights." My stomach dropped. "You are saying they could legally force me to let them stay?" "Not indefinitely, but you might have to go through formal eviction proceedings to remove them, which can take months. And given that they are family with young children, it could get complicated and potentially ugly. So what should I do?" "Document everything. Create a paper trail showing that you never gave permission for a long-term stay. Formally request in writing that they find alternative accommodations within a specific time frame. Be reasonable but firm. And whatever you do, do not change the locks or remove their belongings without going through proper channels. That could backfire badly." I left the meeting with a clearer understanding of my position, but a heavier heart. The idea that I might need legal proceedings to reclaim my own home from my family felt surreal and deeply saddening. That evening I drafted a formal letter, stating that while I sympathized with their situation, They needed to find alternative housing within 48 hours. I printed 3 copies, one for Marcus and Laura, one for my parents, and one for my own records. When I presented the letters after dinner, the reaction was explosive. 48 hours, Marcus shouted, waving the paper in my face. Are you insane? Where are we supposed to go with 2 kids on such short notice? You should have been looking for a place for the past 3 weeks, I pointed out calmly. I have made it clear this arrangement is not working. This is low, Derek, even for you, my father growled. Serving eviction papers to your own brother. It is not an eviction notice, I clarified. It is a formal request asking you to respect my property rights and find alternative accommodation. It sounds like legal language to me, my mother said, her voice trembling. I never thought I would see the day when my own son would treat family like this. Like adults responsible for their own housing. Like people who should respect others' boundaries. I kept my voice level despite my rising frustration. Like strangers, Laura whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Like burdens to be discarded. You are not burdens, I sighed. But this living situation is not sustainable. It was never agreed upon, never planned for, and it is affecting my work and mental health. Your mental health, Marcus scoffed. What about my children's well-being? Do you know what instability does to kids their age? I am concerned about their well-being too, I insisted. But that does not mean I have to sacrifice my home indefinitely. There are other solutions we can explore. Like what Laura demanded. You could stay with Mom and Dad temporarily while looking for a new apartment. I would be willing to help with the security deposit for a new place. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. Our house is not really set up for 2 active boys, my mother hedged. And as we mentioned before, your father's back. So it is fine for them to stay with me indefinitely, disrupting my life and work, but not with you, even temporarily, I asked incredulously. Your house is bigger, my father said defensively, and you do not have health issues. This is unbelievable, I muttered. What is unbelievable? Marcus said, his voice, taking on a dangerous edge, is how quickly you would throw your own family to the wolves, after everything we have done for you. Everything you have done for me, I repeated, genuinely confused. What exactly have you done for me, Marcus? We have always been there for you, he insisted, though he offered no specific examples. And now the one time we need your help, you are serving us with papers. It is not the one time, I countered. Mom and Dad have been bailing you out for years. The difference is they chose to do that. I did not choose this situation. It was forced on me. The argument continued late into the night, growing increasingly hostile. Marcus began making veiled threats about what might happen to my precious possessions if I continued pushing. Things break all the time, he said, with a shrug that did not match the coldness in his eyes. Accidents happen. Are you threatening to damage my property now? I asked in disbelief. Not threatening, just stating facts. Kids can be clumsy, especially when their father is stressed about being homeless. My mother took the twins to their makeshift bedroom, shielding them from the escalating tension, while my father sat silently, his disapproving gaze fixed firmly on me. Laura tried a different approach, her voice sweet, but her words sharply manipulative. The boys love their Uncle Derek so much. They will be devastated to learn he does not want them around anymore, that he is making them leave the home they have started to feel safe in. It was a clear attempt to use the children as emotional leverage, and it made my blood boil. Do not put this on me. Do not make me the bad guy in their eyes for a situation I never created. But you are the bad guy, Marcus said flatly. You have the power to help, and you are choosing not to. Simple as that. Around midnight, exhausted and getting nowhere, I retreated to my bedroom. I locked the door, something I had never needed to do in my own home before, and sat on the edge of my bed, head in my hands. This was no longer just about reclaiming my space. It had become a battle for my autonomy, my right to set boundaries, and my freedom from manipulation. The people who should have supported me were instead using every emotional weapon in their arsenal to make me bend to their will. Sleep eluded me that night, my mind racing with possible scenarios and solutions, none of them perfect. Around 2 a.m, I heard movement in the hallway, followed by the sound of my bedroom doorknob turning. When the door did not open, there was a pause, Then the distinct sound of something being inserted into the lock. I sat up, heart pounding. "Who is there?" No answer, but the scratching at the lock continued. I approached the door cautiously. "I can hear you. Stop trying to break into my room." The scratching stopped. Footsteps retreated down the hall. I stood by the door for several minutes listening, then carefully moved my dresser to barricade the entrance. The violation of even this last private space left me shaken and angry. When morning came, I emerged to find the house unusually quiet. A note on the kitchen counter informed me that everyone had gone out for breakfast, and to discuss options as a family, notably, without including me in that family discussion. Taking advantage of the empty house, I called a locksmith and arranged for the locks to be changed that day while I was at work. I knew from my conversation with Simon that this could potentially complicate matters legally, but the attempted intrusion into my bedroom had crossed a line. My safety and security in my own home had to take priority. When I returned that evening, I found my family sitting in my driveway, unable to enter. Marcus confronted me immediately, his face flushed with anger. "You changed the locks. Are you kidding me? Our stuff is in there." "After someone tried to break into my bedroom last night, I felt it was necessary," I replied calmly. "And your belongings are safe. We can arrange a time for you to collect them." "This is illegal," he shouted. "We have been living here. You cannot just lock us out." Derek James Miller. My mother's voice shook with emotion. "I did not raise you to be this cruel. Your brother has nowhere to go." "That is not true," I said firmly. "He has options. He has chosen not to pursue them because this arrangement was more convenient." The twins began to cry, confused and frightened by the tension. Laura pulled them close, whispering something in their ears that made them look at me with fear and betrayal. "Uncle Derek does not want us anymore," one of them said loudly enough for me to hear, and the deliberate manipulation infuriated me. "That is not true," I said directly to the child. "I care about you very much. But this is my home, and adults need to make proper arrangements for where they live." My father stepped forward, his expression thunderous. "If you do not open that door right now and let your family back in, you are no longer a son of mine." The ultimatum hung in the air between us. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity the pattern that had defined our family dynamic for decades. Compliance was the only acceptable response. Boundaries were seen as betrayal. My needs would always be secondary to Marcus's. "I am sorry you feel that way," I said quietly, "but my decision stands." As my father turned away in disgust and my mother dissolved into tears, I felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. The cost had been high, perhaps higher than I had anticipated, but I had finally broken free from a lifetime of unequal expectations and one-sided sacrifice. That night I slept in my car, unwilling to enter my house while my family's belongings remained inside, concerned about potential legal complications. It was uncomfortable and cold, but as I watched the stars through my windshield, I felt something I had not experienced in weeks' peace. The knowledge that I had finally stood up for myself, despite the painful consequences, brought a kind of solace that made the discomfort worthwhile. The morning after changing my locks, I contacted Simon again for advice on next steps. He recommended a formal approach that would protect me legally, while also providing a humane resolution to the situation. Document everything, he emphasized. Take photos of the current state of your home, make an inventory of any damage, create a detailed list of their belongings, and most importantly, put everything in writing. I took the day off work and spent hours photographing every room, noting changes and damages that had occurred during my family's stay. The marker on the walls, the stains on the furniture, the reorganized kitchen with missing items. My office transformed beyond recognition. Next, I drafted a formal letter outlining the terms for retrieving their belongings. They would have supervised access to the house at an agreed-upon time. They could take only items that belonged to them, with the inventory serving as a reference. I would assist with moving larger items if necessary. I sent the letter by certified mail to my parents' address, where I assumed they were now staying, and waited for a response. It came not by mail, but in the form of a police officer at my door the following afternoon. "Sir, we received a complaint about an illegal eviction at this address. the officer explained. "A family claims you changed the locks while they were out and are refusing to let them retrieve their belongings." I invited him in and calmly explained the situation, showing him the documentation. I had prepared photos of my home before leaving for California, and after my return, the formal notice I had given them evidence that this was my sole property, with no other names on the deed or mortgage. "They moved in without permission while I was away on business," I explained. "I have offered supervised access to collect their things, but they have not responded to that offer directly." The officer reviewed my documentation thoughtfully. "This appears to be a civil matter rather than criminal. Since there was no formal rental agreement and the property is solely in your name, it does not fall under standard eviction protocols. However, you should be aware that they could still pursue civil action." "I understand." I nodded. "I am trying to resolve this reasonably while protecting my property rights." After the officer left, I received a text from Marcus Try with the cops. "This isn't over." His threat prompted me to take additional security measures. I installed a video doorbell and motion-activated cameras around the exterior of my home. I notified my neighbors about the situation, asking them to alert me to any suspicious activity. Several expressed sympathy, having witnessed my family's behavior during their stay. "Those kids were running wild through everyone's yards," my neighbor Jeff told me. "When I mentioned it to your brother, he told me to mind my own business. Not exactly making friends around here." 2 days later, I received a call from my mother. Her voice was strained but controlled. "We need to get their things," she said without preamble. "When can we come by?" We arranged a time for the following Saturday. I asked that only Marcus and Laura come, not the children or my parents, to keep the situation as calm as possible. Surprisingly, they agreed. When Saturday arrived, I had a friend from work present as a neutral witness. Marcus and Laura arrived precisely at the agreed time, their expressions cold but composed. "Let us get this over with," Marcus said as I opened the door. I had organized their belongings in the garage, separated into clearly labeled boxes. Larger items, like the air mattress, were neatly stacked against one wall. "I have packed most of your things," I explained. "You can check that everything is there. If you need help loading anything into your car, I am willing to assist." Laura looked surprised at the organization, perhaps having expected their belongings to be thrown haphazardly into garbage bags. She began checking through the boxes methodically, while Marcus stood with arms crossed, watching me. "This does not change anything," he said quietly. "You have shown your true colors." "I could say the same," I replied. The process took about 2 hours. A few items had been overlooked in the initial packing, which I retrieved from the house as they were identified. When everything was loaded into their vehicles, an uncomfortable silence fell. "Is there anything else?" I asked. "Just one thing," Marcus said, his voice hard. "Mom and Dad may be willing to forgive this eventually, but I want you to know that I won't. As far as I am concerned, I do not have a brother anymore." The words stung despite my preparation for them. "I am sorry you feel that way. I hope someday you will understand that this was not about refusing to help you. It was about the way it happened, without my consent or input." "Save the speeches," he cut me off. "We are done here." As they drove away, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that my home was fully mine again. Sadness at the family relationships damaged perhaps beyond repair. But underneath both a growing sense of validation. I had set a boundary and held it despite immense pressure. I had reclaimed not just my space, but my right to make decisions about my own life. The aftermath brought both challenges and unexpected support. My parents maintained their position that I had betrayed the family, though their anger seemed to subside somewhat over time. Extended family members, initially critical based on the narrative Marcus had spread, became more neutral as the full story emerged. Some cousins even reached out privately to express understanding. "Marcus has always landed on his feet because someone else cushioned his fall," my cousin Brian wrote in a thoughtful email. "Maybe it is time he learned to land on his own." I learned through mutual acquaintances that my parents had indeed taken Marcus and his family in temporarily. Within 2 weeks, they had found a more affordable apartment in a neighboring town. The crisis that supposedly had no solution other than indefinite occupation of my home had been resolved relatively quickly once other options became the only choice. Reclaiming my space became a healing process. I repainted the marked walls, replaced stained furniture, and completely reorganized my office to its former functionality. Each act of restoration felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been taken without permission. My home gradually returned to the sanctuary it had once been, but something had fundamentally changed. The space now represented not just my professional accomplishments, but a personal victory. I had defended my boundaries. I had stood firm in the face of manipulation. I had chosen my well-being even when labeled selfish for doing so. A month after the confrontation, I received an unexpected text from Laura. The boys miss their uncle. They don't understand what happened between the adults. It was the first acknowledgement, however, indirect, that the children had been caught in a conflict not of their making. After consideration, I replied, "I miss them too. Perhaps we could arrange a visit at a neutral location when everyone is ready." She did not respond immediately, but the message opened a door that I had feared permanently closed. The possibility of maintaining a relationship with my nephews, separate from the conflict with their parents, gave me hope that not all family bonds had been severed. As autumn arrived, bringing change to the landscape around my home, I found myself reflecting on the transformation within me as well. The architect who had designed beautiful spaces for others had finally learned to defend the sanctity of his own. 6 months passed before I heard directly from my parents again. The silence between us was painful, but necessary, giving each of us space to process what had happened and consider our parts in it. When my mother finally called her voice sounded older, more hesitant. "Derek, do you have a moment to talk?" We met at a coffee shop halfway between our homes' neutral territory, where neither of us had the home field advantage. She looked tired, the lines around her eyes deeper than I remembered. "Your father wanted to come," she explained, "but he is still processing things." "I understand," I said, though part of me did not. 6 months seemed like ample time to process a conflict, however painful. "How have you been?" she asked, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "Busy, with work. The firm made me partner last month." "That is wonderful," she said, and I could hear genuine pride beneath the awkwardness. "You always were driven." We chatted about neutral topics for a while, carefully avoiding the elephant in the room. Finally, when our coffee cups were nearly empty, she sighed deeply. "I owe you an apology, Derek. We should have asked you before giving Marcus your key. We should have respected your home and your boundaries." The words I had waited months to hear landed with surprising weight. "Thank you for saying that," I replied carefully. "It means a lot." "We were wrong," she continued. "But you need to understand, we were desperate to help Marcus. He has always struggled in ways you never did. When he came to us about the eviction, all I could think about was my grandchildren without a home." "I understand the impulse to help," I said, "but the way it happened made me feel completely disregarded, like my needs and boundaries did not matter at all." She nodded slowly. "I see that now. We fell into old patterns, treating you as the strong, capable one who would always understand and adapt. It wasn't fair." The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, touching on not just the recent conflict, but decades of family dynamics. For perhaps the first time, my mother truly listened to my perspective without becoming defensive or dismissive. I, in turn, tried to understand the fears and anxieties that had driven her actions. "How is Marcus doing?" I finally asked. "Better, actually. The new apartment is small but functional. He found a job at a warehouse with decent benefits. Laura is working part-time now that the boys are in school." She hesitated. "The situation with you, it was a wake-up call for him in some ways. He had to step up. And the boys." A smile softened her face. "They ask about their uncle sometimes. They miss your big backyard." "I miss them too," I admitted. "They are great kids despite the circumstances." Would you be open to seeing them sometime? Under different terms, of course." "I would like that," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. "Maybe we could start with something simple like an afternoon at the park." As we parted ways, my mother hugged me tightly. "I am sorry we lost sight of how much you matter too," she whispered. "I hope we can rebuild trust." "One step at a time," I replied. The healing process with my family was neither quick nor simple. My father took longer to come around his pride, making it difficult to acknowledge the wrong that had been done. Marcus remained distant, though he eventually sent a brief text on my birthday, a small but significant olive branch. 3 months after coffee with my mother, I met my nephews at a local playground, Laura watching carefully from a bench nearby. The boys were initially shy, unsure how to interact with the uncle they had not seen in nearly a year. "Do you still have Nintendo?" one of them finally asked. "I do," I laughed. "Maybe you can come play sometime soon if your mom agrees." Slowly, carefully, new relationships began to form, not based on the old dysfunctional patterns, but on mutual respect and clear boundaries. I was no longer the endlessly accommodating brother who could be taken advantage of, but neither was I completely estranged. We found a middle ground where family connections could exist without sacrificing individual needs. The experience changed me in profound ways. I began seeing a therapist, regularly exploring the patterns that had led me to prioritize others' needs at the expense of my own. I learned to recognize the difference between genuine generosity and unhealthy self-sacrifice. Boundaries are not selfish, my therapist reminded me during one session. They are necessary for healthy relationships. Without them, resentment grows where love should flourish. I thought about those words often as I rebuilt my sense of self and security. My home, once again, my sanctuary, took on new meaning. It represented not just my professional success, but my personal growth, a space where I could welcome others on my terms from a position of strength rather than obligation. A year after the lock-changing confrontation, I hosted a small dinner party. My parents attended, as did Marcus, Laura, and the twins. The atmosphere was initially tense, but as the evening progressed, a new kind of family dynamic began to emerge. One based on choice rather than expectation, on respect rather than entitlement. As we sat around my dining table, now cleared of arts and craft supplies and properly set for a meal, I realized something important. True family supports each other's growth and independence. It does not demand sacrifice without consent. It does not take without asking. It respects the boundaries that allow each member to thrive. The conflict had been painful, the estrangement difficult to bear. But through it I had found a truth that would guide me forward. Compassion without self-respect is not kindness but self-erasure. By reclaiming my space and my autonomy, I had not destroyed my family relationships but transformed them into something healthier, more balanced, and ultimately more genuine. My house was mine again, but more importantly, so was my life. And in that reclamation I had discovered something unexpected: the courage to love others without losing myself in the process. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? What challenges did you face, and how did you navigate them? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life lessons. Remember, standing up for yourself doesn't mean you don't care about others. It means you care enough about yourself to create relationships built on mutual respect. Thank you for listening, and until next time, take care of yourself first. You deserve it.